My niece pushed my little daughter out of her chair, looked her in the eyes, and said, "Go away, you do not belong here," and every LT in that room stayed silent, so I picked up my daughter and made a decision nobody saw coming. My daughter was on the floor. Not the careful sitting down of a 4-year-old who decided to play on the carpet. The floor in the specific way of a child who has been pushed, legs still in the position they were in when the chair was underneath her, hands flat on the hardwood in the automatic catch of a small body that did not see it coming. Her face had not yet decided what it felt. That window of a second and a half between the moment a thing happens to a child and the moment they understand that it has happened, when their expression is still just open and waiting. My niece Bree was 7. She stood beside the chair she had just emptied, both hands at her sides, and she looked down at my daughter Lily with the specific expression of a child who has done something deliberately and is watching for the result with the focused attention of someone conducting an experiment. "Go away." Bree's voice. Clear and unhurried. The voice of a child who had said a thing she had been thinking for a while and was delivering it now with the confidence of someone who believed the room would not correct her. "You do not belong here." The room had 8 LTS in it. My mother. My sister Diane. Diane's husband Cam. My aunt Roselle. 3 of Diane's in-laws who were at the holiday gathering because they were always at the holiday gathering and had been folded into the family event calendar years ago. My husband Marcus, who was in the kitchen doorway with a glass in his hand and his face doing the thing it did when he was waiting to follow my lead. 8 at LTS. Not one of them spoke. My mother looked at the table. Diane's hand moved to her wine glass. Cam found something to examine on the far wall. Roselle made a sound that was not words. The in-laws performed the specific absorption of guests who have decided that family dynamics are not their territory. The silence lasted 4 seconds. Lily's face completed its journey from open to understanding, her chin dropped and her eyes filled. I was across the room in the way that a parent crosses a room when their child is on the floor, not running but covering distance faster than walking, and I reached Lily before the first sound came out of her. I put my hands under her arms. I picked her up. She came up into my chest with the full body weight of a 4-year-old who needed to be held, and I held her with both arms and her face went into my neck. I stood in the middle of my mother's living room holding my daughter, and I looked at the 8 at LTS who had watched a 7-year-old push a 4-year-old out of a chair and tell her she did not belong there. Not one of them was looking at me. The silence in that room had a specific quality. The quality of people who had made a collective decision to wait and see whether the moment would dissolve on its own, whether I would manage it quietly, whether the gathering could resume its surface without anyone having to address what had just happened 2 feet in front of them. I looked at my mother. She picked up her fork. I looked at Diane. Diane's eyes came up to mine for 1 second and moved away. Bree was still standing beside the empty chair with her hands at her sides, watching me now, the experiment producing a result she was evaluating. Marcus appeared fully in the kitchen doorway. His glass still in his hand. His eyes on my face. I looked at him once. He put his glass down on the counter behind him. I turned toward the hallway with Lily in my arms. Let me go back to the architecture of this family before I tell you what the decision looked like, because the moment in the living room did not arrive without a structure supporting it. My sister Diane is 4 years older than me and has one daughter, Bree, who is 7 and has been raised in the specific way of a child who has understood from early on that her mother's default response to her behavior is explanation rather than consequence. Diane is not a cruel parent. She is a conflict-averse one, which produces a different kind of damage, the kind that arrives not from what is done to a child but from what is consistently not done, the correction that does not come, the limit that is discussed and renegotiated and ultimately not held. Bree was an only child until Lily arrived 4 years ago, and the arrival of a cousin had been, from the beginning, a complication that Bree processed through behavior that Diane processed through the explanation of feelings rather than the correction of actions. I had watched this for 4 years. I had watched Bree take things from Lily's hands and heard Diane say she was still learning about sharing. I had watched Bree exclude Lily from games with the targeted precision of a child who understood exactly what she was doing and heard Diane say Bree needed space to be the older one sometimes. I had watched Bree speak to Lily with a dismissiveness that belonged to someone 4 times her age and heard Diane say Bree was just going through a phase. Each thing alone was manageable. The accumulation was not. My mother operated as an amplifier of Diane's approach, which was her consistent function in the family, the legitimizing presence that converted Diane's choices into consensus through the specific power of a grandmother who preferred peace to accountability and had organized her emotional resources accordingly. I had raised my concerns directly with Diane twice. The first time, Diane had listened with the attentive expression of a woman who was deciding how to make the concern feel addressed without actually addressing it. She had talked about Bree's adjustment period and the developmental challenges of the age and the importance of letting children work through social dynamics with gentle guidance rather than correction. The second time, 6 months before the living room, I had been more direct. I had told Diane that Lily was coming home from family gatherings with a specific quietness that I recognized as the quietness of a child who had been made to feel small, and that I needed the behavior to be corrected rather than explained. Diane's eyes had done the specific thing they did when she was hurt and was converting the hurt into a position. She had told me that Bree was a sensitive child who responded to correction by closing down, and that the approach that worked for Lily might not be the approach that worked for Bree, and that perhaps I needed to consider whether I was reading the dynamic accurately. My mother had been present for this conversation and had said that all children went through phases and that both Diane and I were doing our best. I had left that conversation understanding that the structure was not going to change from the inside. My closest friend, a woman named Petra who had known me since graduate school and who had heard the Bree accounting in its various installments across 4 years, had said something at dinner 3 weeks before the holiday gathering. Her fork down on the plate, the gesture she used when she was going to finish the thought before she picked it back up. You keep waiting for Diane to correct it. Her voice. Even. But Diane is never going to correct it because correcting it requires Diane to acknowledge it, and acknowledging it requires her to admit she's been watching it happen for 4 years and calling it a phase. My water glass. The restaurant around us. She's my sister. Yes. Petra picked up her fork. And Lily is your daughter. Those two things are not equivalent obligations, and I think you've been treating them like they are. I drove home that night with the specific restlessness of a person who has heard an accurate thing and is not yet ready to act on it but cannot unhear it. The holiday gathering was in 3 weeks. I went. The gathering had been its ordinary surface for the first 2 hours. My mother's house, the holiday configuration of furniture that had not changed in 15 years, the smell of the food that defined the event, the specific texture of a family that functioned adequately in shared spaces as long as nothing required anyone to be honest about anything. Lily had been careful in the way she was always careful at family gatherings now. The careful that a 4-year-old develops when she has learned that certain spaces require her to be smaller than she is at home. I watched her navigate the room with the specific observation of a mother who knew her child's body language and could read the subtle management of it. Bree had been adjacent to Lily for most of the afternoon in the way that proximity operates when one child is watching another for the right moment. Not malicious in the ADLT sense. Deliberate in the child's sense, which is its own thing entirely and produces the same result. The chair had been set up at the children's table. Both girls had been seated. Lily had the chair near the window because she asked for it, and it had been free and nobody had assigned seats. Bree had looked at the chair, then at Lily, and the sequence of what followed was short and complete. The push. The floor. The 2 sentences. The silence of 8 at LTS. And then me, crossing the room, picking up my daughter, holding her in my arms in the middle of my mother's living room while 8 people found other places to direct their attention. The bedroom at the end of my mother's hallway had been mine until I was 19. The furniture was different now, the room repurposed in the way of spaces that outlived their original function. I carried Lily in and closed the door with my foot and sat on the edge of the bed with her in my lap and let her cry through the full duration of it without rushing the end. She cried for 3 minutes. Real crying, the kind that requires a body to move through it. Then it slowed and she was still in my arms with the specific weight of a child who has spent something. My hand on her back. The door closed. The gathering on the other side of it, muffled and continuing. Did I do something wrong? Lily's voice. Small. The question that lands in a parent's chest like something sharp. My hand on her back continuing its movement. No. My voice quiet. Completely certain. You did nothing wrong. Her face still against my shoulder. Then why did she say I don't belong? The room. The closed door. The question of a 4-year-old that had no answer suitable for a 4-year-old. Because sometimes people say things that are not true. My voice. And what she said is not true. Marcus knocked once and came in. He closed the door behind him. He sat on the other side of Lily and put his hand on her back from the other direction, and the 3 of us sat in the room at the end of the hallway while the gathering continued without us. His eyes came up to mine over Lily's head. I looked at him for a moment. We're leaving, I told him. Quiet. Completely certain. And I'm going to say something before we go. His hand on Lily's back. His eyes on mine. He nodded once. The nod of a man who had been waiting for this version of his wife for 4 years and was not going to be the thing that delayed it. I carried Lily back into the living room. Her face was composed in the way of a child who has been held through the crying and has arrived on the other side of it. My arms around her. Marcus behind me. The room registered our return with the specific attention of people who had been waiting to see which version of this scene came back through the door. I looked at Diane. She had her wine glass in her hand. Her face had the prepared quality of a woman who had been using the time we were in the bedroom to locate her position, the one where she was a good mother who was about to navigate a difficult moment with grace. I need to say something. My voice carrying into the room without volume, without the performance of anger. The voice of a person delivering information. And I need everyone in this room to hear it. The gathering went to a different kind of quiet. Bree was at the children's table. Her eyes on me. The experiment still running. Bree pushed Lily out of a chair and told her she does not belong here. My voice level. In front of every LT in this room. And every LT in this room stayed silent. Diane's wine glass moving toward the table. I'm not going to manage this quietly. My voice. I'm not going to take Lily to a bedroom and absorb this and come back out and let the gathering continue and call my sister next week and have a careful conversation about phases and development and gentle guidance. My mother's face had the expression it wore when she was deciding whether to intervene. Mom. My voice. Still quiet. Still even? Do not. Her mouth closed. Bree. I looked at my niece. 7 years old, both hands flat on the table, watching me with the focused attention of a child who was receiving something new. Her eyes on mine. What you did was wrong. My voice. Not loud. Not performed. The flat certainty of a statement of fact. Lily belongs everywhere she goes. You do not get to tell her otherwise. Not here and not anywhere. The room was completely still. Diane was on her feet. Nolan. I'm not finished. My voice. The same register. Unraised. I have watched this for 4 years. I have raised it twice. I have been told about phases and adjustment periods and developmental stages, and I have absorbed it because this is family and I wanted to believe it would change. My arms around Lily. Her head against my shoulder. It has not changed. My voice. And tonight was the end of my willingness to keep absorbing it. I looked at my mother. Then at Diane. Then at the room. We're leaving. I picked up Lily's bag from the chair near the door. And I need everyone in this room to understand that the next gathering I bring Lily to will be one where I have a reason to believe this will not happen again. I do not have that reason tonight. Marcus had our coats. The front door of my mother's house opened. We walked out into the December evening and the door closed behind us, and the cold air was the specific cold of a night that follows a thing that cannot be taken back. Lily asked if we were coming back. The car. The December cold outside the windows. Marcus driving, both hands on the wheel, his eyes on the road with the expression of a man who had nothing to add and understood that having nothing to add was the correct contribution. Her voice from the back seat, not sad anymore, just asking. The practical curiosity of a 4-year-old processing an event. Not tonight, baby. My voice. For Christmas? My hands in my lap. The city moving past. I don't know yet. She accepted this with a matter-of-factness she applied to most things. She looked out the window and we drove, and by the time we reached home she had moved on in the complete way of a 4-year-old whose mother had told her she did nothing wrong and held her through the crying and then stood in the living room and said the thing out loud. She was fine. She was 4 and she was fine. I was the one who sat at the kitchen table after she was in bed and felt the specific weight of a thing that could not be undone. Diane called at 9:40. Her voice when I picked up had the quality of a woman who had been composing this call for 2 hours and had decided on an approach and was executing it. You humiliated my daughter. Her voice. The controlled register of managed anger. In front of the whole family. In front of her grandparents. She is 7 years old. My kitchen table. My hands flat on the surface. Your daughter pushed my daughter off a chair and told her she does not belong here. My voice. Even. In front of the whole family. In front of her grandparents. My daughter is 4 years old. A silence. Children do things. Diane's voice. That is what children do. They need guidance, not public correction. 8 at LTS stayed silent. My voice. I was not publicly correcting Bree. I was publicly naming what 8 at LTS had just decided to pretend did not happen. You made it so much bigger than it needed to be. Diane. A pause. I made it exactly the size it was. You have been making it smaller than it was for 4 years, and this is where that ends up. Her breath on the other end. The controlled breath of a woman who had prepared for my response and was now in a section of the conversation the preparation had not covered. She's going to need therapy over this. Diane's voice. Lower now. The performance of calm over something raw. You telling her she was wrong in front of everyone, she's going to carry that. My hands on the table. The kitchen around me. Your daughter pushed a 4-year-old onto the floor and told her she does not belong here. My voice. Patient. Careful. I told her that was wrong. Those two things happened in that order. I need you to hold both of them at the same time before you tell me about the damage I caused. A long silence. I have spent 4 years being careful. My voice quiet. I have been careful with you and careful with Mom and careful with the gathering and careful about not making things difficult. I have managed my concerns through the appropriate channels and absorbed the outcome every time the channels produced nothing. My hands still flat on the table. I am done being careful about this. Diane's voice when it came back had something in it that was not anger anymore. Something that was more complex and less comfortable. You're saying you're not going to bring Lily to family events. I'm saying I'm not going to bring Lily to family events where there is no reason to believe she will be safe from this. My voice. When I have that reason, I will bring her. And what does that look like? Her voice. Cautious now. It looks like Bree receiving actual consequences for what happened tonight. My voice. Not an explanation of feelings. Not a discussion about adjustment periods. Consequences. The kind that tell a 7-year-old that there is a line and she crossed it. Diane was quiet for a long time. You're asking me to parent differently. Her voice. The stripped-down version. The one without the performance. Yes. My voice. I am. The call ended shortly after. Not warmly. Not with resolution. With the specific texture of a conversation that had named something real and left both people sitting in the aftermath of the naming. My mother called the following morning. Her voice had the careful brightness she used when she needed to address something without fully addressing it, the tone she had deployed my entire life for the moments that required navigation rather than honesty. Last night was difficult. Her voice. My coffee. The Sunday morning light? Yes. Even. Diane is very upset. A pause. Bree cried for an hour after you left. My coffee cup. Both hands around it. Lily cried in the bedroom before I came back out. My voice. While 8 at LTS sat in the living room and waited for me to manage it quietly. A silence. I didn't know what to say. My mother's voice. The admission arriving with the specific difficulty of something a person has been holding and has finally decided to put down. It happened so fast. It happened in front of you. My voice. Quiet. Not cruel. Honest. You have been present for this for 4 years, Mom. You have watched Bree treat Lily as less than for 4 years and you have nodded along when Diane explained it and you picked up your fork last night. A longer silence. I picked up my fork. Her voice. Repeating it. The specific echo of a person hearing their own action described and finding the description accurate and uncomfortable. Yes. My voice. I didn't know what to do. Her voice again. Quieter. You could have said something to Bree. My voice. Patient. You could have looked at Lily. You could have done one thing that told my daughter that what happened to her was visible and wrong and that the LTS in the room saw it. The silence on her end had a texture I had not heard in it before. The texture of a woman sitting inside her own inaction and finding it smaller than she wanted it to be. I'm sorry. Her voice. Low. Genuine in the specific way that genuine arrives when it has had to work through a lot of resistance to get there. My coffee. The morning light. I know. My voice quiet. I need more than sorry, Mom. I need to know that the next time something happens, somebody in that room is going to do something before I have to. A long pause. I can do that. Her voice. The voice of a woman making a commitment she was not certain she could keep but was deciding to try. Then we have somewhere to start. My voice. Petra came over on Sunday afternoon with coffee and the specific energy of a friend who had been waiting to hear how it went and was prepared to stay as long as the conversation required. I told her the full sequence. The chair. The floor. Bree's voice. The 8 at LTS. The bedroom. What I said when I came back out. The calls from Diane and my mother. She listened through all of it without interrupting. When I finished, she picked up her cup. How do you feel? Her voice. My hands around my own cup. The Sunday afternoon settling into the apartment. Like I put something down that I've been carrying for 4 years. My voice. And like I don't know yet what the space where it was is going to hold. That's honest. She looked at me over her cup. Are you worried about Lily? Lily is fine. My voice. She asked if we were coming back for Christmas and then she moved on. She's 4 and her mother told her she did nothing wrong and held her through the crying and then stood up and said the thing out loud. A pause. She's going to be fine because she learned last night that when something happens to her, somebody in the room is going to move. Petra was quiet for a moment. That's what the whole thing was about. Her voice. Not a question. Yes. My voice. That's what it was always about. Christmas was at our apartment that year. Not a dramatic announcement. Not a declaration sent to the family with conditions attached. Simply the honest logistics of a decision I had already made. Lily's Christmas was going to be in a space where she was the center of it rather than the complication of it, and the space I could guarantee that in was my own home. Marcus made the food. Petra came with her partner. My friend Darius and his family filled the apartment with the specific warmth of chosen people who knew how to be present without requiring management. Lily wore the dress she had picked herself and opened her gifts with the full-body enthusiasm of a 4-year-old who had not been made to feel small in the room she was in, and I watched her and felt something settle in me that had been unsettled for 4 years. My mother came for 2 hours in the afternoon. She brought gifts and she sat on the floor with Lily and let Lily show her every new thing, and she was present in the way she had not been in the living room 2 weeks earlier. It was not everything. It was something. I let it be something without requiring it to be everything. Diane sent a gift for Lily through my mother. A card with Bree's name on it in child's handwriting, the letters uneven and careful. I showed it to Lily. Lily looked at it and put it with her other cards and went back to her toys. Bree and Lily saw each other 6 weeks later at a small gathering my mother hosted with what I understood as intentional structure, a shorter event, fewer people, my mother present in the room the entire time with the specific alertness of a woman who had made a commitment and was keeping it. Bree was different. Not transformed. Not the sudden product of 6 weeks of perfect parenting. Different in the specific way of a child who has received an actual consequence and is navigating the new geography it produced. She did not push. She did not exclude. She played beside Lily with the cautious energy of a 7-year-old who was learning, slowly and imperfectly, that there was a line and the line was real. I watched from across the room. My mother watched from the chair near the window. Nothing happened. That was the entire event. Nothing happened and Lily played and came home in the ordinary way of a child who had had a normal afternoon, and the ordinary was the thing I had been trying to produce for 4 years and had finally produced by stopping the management that was preventing it. I think about the living room sometimes. The chair on the floor and Lily's face in that second and a half before she understood what had happened to her. I think about the 8 at LTS and what those 4 seconds of silence built and what they would have continued to build if I had taken Lily to the bedroom and absorbed it and come back out and let the gathering resume. What those 4 seconds of silence would have built in Lily is the understanding that when something happens to her, the at LTS in the room wait to see if it goes away. That her experience is an inconvenience to be managed. That the correct response to being pushed and told you do not belong is to be carried quietly to a room and cried through, then brought back out to smile. I was not going to build that in my daughter. The decision nobody saw coming was not dramatic. It was not a speech designed for an audience or a confrontation staged for effect. It was a mother picking up her child and walking back into the room and saying the thing out loud in the specific voice of a person who has been careful for 4 years and has arrived at the place where careful is no longer the honest response. It was the voice that said, I see what happened to my daughter, I see what every LT in this room decided to do about it, and I am going to say both of those things clearly and then I am going to leave and the next version of this gathering is going to be different or I am going to keep leaving. And if you are reading this from inside a room where something is happening to your child and the ad LTS around you are finding other places to look, understand this, your child is watching you the way Lily was watching me, and what they are learning in that moment is not what Bree said to them. What they are learning is whether the person who is supposed to move for them will move. Move. Move before the silence builds something in your child that will take years to undo. The chair on the floor takes 4 seconds to respond to. The child who learned nobody moved takes considerably longer.